Those hearing the details of the death of 5-year-old Callie Anderson could only imagine the suffering of her final days. According to investigators, she died of malnutrition, the victim of what appeared to be willful neglect and abuse out of sight in the Reno apartment her father, Tyler Anderson, and his wife, Avriana Enoch, shared. At some point in the spring of 2018, she died. Her body was apparently driven to Sacramento and placed in a storage locker, where it was later discovered.
Even the detectives who had seen everything in their careers said they would never forget that day. What began as a routine welfare check in a quiet storage facility in Sacramento would soon turn into one of the most haunting child cases in modern American history. Inside a sealed plastic container, police discovered the remains of a young girl. Small, fragile, and robbed of her future. Her name was Callie Anderson. She was only 5 years old. The details of how Callie's short life ended left investigators shaken. But what truly broke them was not only what happened to her, it was how many people could have stopped it and didn't. Social workers, relatives, neighbors, judges, one by one, the safety nets that were supposed to protect her failed. Every time someone asked a question, the system looked the other way. Every time her mother begged for help, no one listened. In the days that followed, as police pieced together the timeline, the story that emerged was almost unbearable to hear. It wasn't just the tragedy of a single child. It was the portrait of neglect, silence, and disbelief, of a little girl whose suffering was hidden in plain sight. To understand what truly happened to Callie, we have to go back, before the storage unit, before the police, before the silence. Back to the days when she was still laughing, still dancing, still calling out for her mom in a voice full of joy. This is not just the story of a crime. It is the story of how innocence can vanish behind closed doors, how love can be stolen by jealousy and fear, and how a child's voice can fade into the background until it is too late. This is the story of Callie Anderson and the countless warnings the world ignored. Before her name became a headline, Callie Anderson was simply a little girl with bright brown eyes and a smile that lit up every room she entered. Born in September 2012, she was the kind of child who made people soften just by being near her. Her mother, Leanne Robinson, called her "my little miracle." In photos from those early years, Callie can be seen in her pink pajamas, hugging her favorite stuffed bunny, or clutching a small cup with a straw she refused to drink without. To her family, she was sunshine. Curious, sweet, full of laughter. She loved Hello Kitty. Her bedroom walls were covered with stickers of the character. She even wore a little pink shirt with Hello Kitty's face printed across it. To her mother, that tiny cat became a symbol of Callie's personality. Innocent, gentle, and full of imagination. Every bedtime, Leanne would whisper stories and promises. That they would bake cupcakes the next morning, go to the park, and feed the ducks together. For a while, those promises came true, but happiness in Callie's life was short-lived. Her parents, Tyler Anderson and Leanne, were still teenagers when she was born. Tyler was only 17, unstable, lost, and already sliding into trouble. Their relationship fractured quickly. When Tyler met a new girlfriend named Avriana Enoch, jealousy and resentment began to brew. Avriana was just 17 too, with her own history of emotional struggles. She wanted all of Tyler's attention and couldn't stand the thought of another woman's child being part of his life. What no one could have predicted was how far that resentment would go. The turning point came when a family court judge, against all reason, granted full custody of Callie to her father, a boy barely out of high school. Leanne fought desperately, begging the court not to take her daughter away. She knew something wasn't right, but her pleas went unheard. The gavel struck, and with that single decision, a fragile line between safety and tragedy was erased. From that day forward, Callie's laughter would begin to fade. What had once been a happy home became a place where her joy slowly disappeared, replaced by fear, silence, and isolation. After the court's decision, Callie moved in with her father, Tyler, and his girlfriend, Avriana, in Woodland, California. On paper, it looked like a family trying to start fresh. In reality, it was the beginning of Callie's disappearance from the world. Tyler had a record of substance use and was barely holding jobs. Avriana, described by friends as unpredictable and controlling, viewed Callie not as a child to love, but as a rival for Tyler's attention. In 2014, the couple welcomed their first son, Terrell. What should have been a joyful moment only deepened Avriana's resentment. Relatives recalled how her tone would change when Callie entered the room. There were whispers, eye rolls, and sharp words hidden behind closed doors. Soon, Callie became invisible within her own home, treated differently, spoken to differently, left out of family photos. That same year, a doctor recorded Callie's last medical visit. She was 2 years old, healthy, and full of life. The doctor scheduled a follow-up appointment, but Tyler canceled it. And from that moment on, Callie would never see another physician. No checkups, no school enrollment, no official trace. Family members began to worry. Tyler's aunt, a woman named Mean, noticed small crescent-shaped marks on Callie's cheeks during a family gathering. They looked like scratches or pressure marks, hastily covered with makeup. Ivana dismissed the concerns, saying Callie had fallen while playing, but each time relatives saw her, the changes were more alarming. The once lively girl grew quieter, thinner, withdrawn. When Mean filed a report with California's Child Protective Services, she believed she was saving Callie's life. But CPS visited once, spoke briefly to the parents, and closed the case. Unfounded, they said. Case closed, no follow-up. Another chance to save her, lost. By 2017, Tyler and Ivana moved to Reno, Nevada, cutting off all communication with the family. Relatives called, texted, begged to see Callie, but the couple ignored every message. Even her grandmother, Donna Howard, drove from California to visit, only to be told that Callie was in daycare. Yet the next day, when Donna finally saw her granddaughter, the shock left her speechless. Callie looked fragile and lifeless, her eyes hollow, her spark gone. It was the last time anyone in the family would ever see her alive. When the Anderson family settled into their small apartment on Harvard Way in Reno, neighbors saw a young couple with children and assumed life inside was ordinary. But for Callie, that apartment became a silent prison. The lease listed 3 children, yet the building manager later testified that she had never once seen a little girl matching Callie's description. It was as if she had vanished in plain sight. By early 2018, the isolation was complete. Tyler spent long hours away at work, while Ivana stayed home. To outsiders, she was just another mother caring for her kids. Inside, she ruled with control and cruelty disguised as discipline. Callie was no longer treated as part of the family. She was separated, punished, and silenced. Her laughter was replaced by quiet sobs that no one outside those walls ever heard. Family members tried calling, but the excuses kept coming. Callie was sleeping, at daycare, or with friends. Each excuse pushed her further into the shadows. Even the neighbors began to notice that something didn't add up. They would see Tyler playing outside with his sons, but never with a little girl. At some point that spring, Callie's health began to fail. The child who once danced in pink socks could barely walk. But instead of reaching out for help, Ivana and Tyler hid what was happening. They stopped answering calls, avoided visits, and lived behind drawn curtains. What unfolded during those final weeks remains a tragedy too heavy to describe in full. By late April 2018, Callie's small body could no longer fight. She grew weaker by the day, until one evening, her breathing slowed and then stopped. Instead of calling for help, panic took over. Tyler and Ivana decided to hide what had happened, to pretend nothing had gone wrong. They placed her body inside a duffel bag, then sealed it within a blue plastic container. For weeks, that container sat in their apartment, silent and hidden, while life went on around it. When the smell became impossible to ignore, Tyler loaded the container into his car and drove it across state lines to Sacramento, claiming it contained storage boxes. He rented a unit and left it there, locked and forgotten. But secrets never stay buried. Within days, a worker at the facility opened the unit, saw what was inside, and immediately called the police. What they found would haunt them forever, not only for what it revealed, but for what it said about every person who had failed to protect that little girl. When detectives arrived at the storage facility in Sacramento, the air was thick with unease. The man who had rented the unit, Tyler Anderson, was quickly identified. He had told the facility manager he only needed a place for a few boxes. That lie began to unravel within hours. Investigators traced the rental back to Reno, Nevada, and soon realized the unimaginable. This was not a missing persons case. It was the end of one. Tyler was arrested during a traffic stop while heading back toward the storage site. In his car, police found cleaning supplies, lighter fluid, and a small box of matches. His intentions were clear. He had planned to destroy whatever evidence remained. Back in Reno, detectives entered the family's apartment, and what they saw inside confirmed the scope of the tragedy. The home was in disarray. 2 small boys were found hungry and frightened. In the bathroom stood a large metal cage, rusted, bent, and bearing traces that told a story of long suffering. It was there that investigators recovered a child's backpack embroidered with the name Callie. Inside were small toys, hair ties, and a pink ribbon, reminders of the little girl who had once lived there. Every corner of the apartment seemed frozen in time, haunted by her absence. As the investigation unfolded, Ivana was taken in for questioning. Her demeanor shifted from denial to confusion to quiet acceptance. At first, she claimed not to know what had happened, but as detectives revealed what they had found, her story began to collapse. She admitted that Callie had died at home, but insisted it wasn't her fault. Tyler, meanwhile, stayed mostly silent, occasionally mumbling that he didn't mean for things to go this far. When the case reached court, the evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies from family members, medical experts, and investigators painted a picture of prolonged neglect. The prosecution emphasized not only what the parents had done, but how many agencies had failed to intervene. The defense argued emotional instability and denial, but the jury wasn't convinced. Tyler Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 2 life terms with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Ivana Enoch was convicted of first-degree murder by torture and child endangerment. Her sentence, life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Yet for many, those numbers meant little. How could 2 people responsible for such horror still have the possibility of freedom? How could the same system that ignored every warning now offer leniency? The verdict brought closure on paper, but not in spirit. For Callie's family, especially her mother, Leanne, the wound would never heal. She trusted everyone, Leanne said softly outside the courtroom. And everyone failed her. When the verdict was announced, the courtroom was silent. Reporters described a moment that felt both victorious and hollow. Outside, candlelight vigils began to appear in Reno, Sacramento, and Woodland, 3 cities connected by the same tragedy. Strangers brought pink balloons, small Hello Kitty toys, and handmade signs that read, "Justice for Callie." But behind those gestures of love, there was anger. Anger at a system that had seen the warning signs and done nothing. News outlets across the country began asking the same painful questions. How could a 5-year-old girl disappear from medical records, school rosters, and social services without anyone noticing? How many reports had to be ignored before she was lost entirely? Each article seemed to point to the same truth. Callie wasn't just a victim of her parents, she was a victim of indifference. Child advocates and social workers called it a wake-up call. They demanded reforms in child protective services, more accountability, and better follow-up procedures. Legislators in both Nevada and California publicly promised change, yet many of those promises faded once the cameras were gone. For Callie's mother, the attention was both comforting and cruel. Comfort because people finally cared. Cruel because they cared too late. Community members who had never met Callie began sharing her story online. Photos of her smiling face spread across social media with messages like, "Protect the voiceless" and "Never again." Teachers wrote about the importance of noticing quiet children. Nurses talked about their duty to report when something feels wrong. Even seasoned detectives admitted that this case haunted them long after it closed. But there was another kind of silence. The silence of those who had looked away when it mattered most. Some relatives who had once dismissed Leanne's concerns stayed out of the spotlight. CPS officials refused interviews. The same judge who granted Tyler custody years earlier avoided public comment. In the court of public opinion, they had already been convicted by conscience. Through it all, Leanne remained steadfast. At a memorial service held 2 years later, she stood before a small crowd, holding Callie's favorite pink cup. "She deserved a childhood," she said softly. "She deserved love, laughter, and the chance to grow up. All she wanted was to be seen." Her voice trembled, but did not break. For the first time, people were truly listening. Time has passed since that heartbreaking discovery, but Callie's name continues to echo through courtrooms, classrooms, and homes across America. Her story has become more than a case file. It's a reminder of what happens when silence wins, when bureaucracy becomes blindness, and when compassion fades from the institutions meant to protect the innocent. Callie should have been in school now, learning to read, drawing with crayons, and bringing home art projects for her mother to hang on the fridge. She should have been laughing with her little brothers, celebrating birthdays and dreaming of who she wanted to become. Instead, her memory lives on through photographs, stories, and the quiet determination of those who refuse to let her be forgotten. In Woodland, neighbors still leave pink ribbons tied to fences every April, the month she was last seen alive. Each ribbon carries a message, not of pity, but of purpose. Teachers and social workers have used her case in training sessions, urging colleagues to look closer, to listen longer, to never assume. If something feels wrong, one counselor said, say something. You might be the only voice that child has. For Leanne Robinson, the grief has become a mission. She now speaks at schools and community centers, telling parents and professionals that one question, one phone call, can save a life. Don't let fear keep you quiet, she tells them. Don't think someone else will take care of it. Be the person who notices. Callie's favorite Hello Kitty shirt was found among her things, small, faded, but still pink. Leanne keeps it folded in a box beside a candle that burns each night. It's how I remind myself she's still here, she once said. Every time I light it, I promise her the world won't forget. If her story has reached you, let it be more than a tragedy you watch and move on from. Let it be a call to action, to protect the silent, to question what doesn't feel right, to make sure that every child is seen, heard, and loved. Callie Anderson never got the chance to grow up, but through awareness, through remembrance, through voices like yours, her light can still change lives. Rest in peace, Callie. You were loved. You were worthy. You will never be forgotten.